And just as you stop, I'm going to ask you to keep going because our next question really is that next piece of how can young people be supported to exit homelessness permanently?
Yeah, this is another one of these kind of nuanced answers. Um, and there's a great program that you might be able to pull up as a part of this course called Family Reconnect. And the idea there is fundamentally prevention. And the idea is a good one. Is where if a young person is turning up into an emergency service like a shelter, a drop-in, and so on, but shelters in particular, how can we do quick assessments about what's going on? Is this uh, an irredeemable situation where there was profound violence and neglect in the home? There's no other supports. Everything has collapsed. That's quite different than where there's some serious problems with mom and dad, and maybe addictions issues, maybe there's been some violence, whatever the scenario is. However, there's a good relationship with grandma, and there's an opportunity to kind of re-engage with school, to get into a home with a family member or family friend, perhaps, where there's some safety and stability. You got to assess that. You got to make sure you're not kind of encouraging a young person back into another dangerous environment. Turn them around fast. Limited time in the shelter, and just right back and try and pick up with as much stuff that was there before as possible. And this can be really impactful because the young person isn't starting to take on some of those identities and understandings of self that are tied in with homelessness. It's a predacious environment, if I could use that term, whether it's sex trafficking, young people, and it's often young people. And I think there's a bit of evidence behind this. I wouldn't say it's a done deal, but sometimes young people that have faced more violence and adversity before homelessness can do a little better in homeless environments because they're less trusting. They know what violent and dangerous people look like, and they know how dangerous people can be. Versus some young people that come from slightly more sheltered or much more sheltered environments can come onto the streets much more naive, and the predators can pick them out pretty easily, can see them coming, and can look at ways of giving them some free substances to use. The predators can be super charismatic, really funny and friendly, and be their pal and introduce them to people, and then try to tell you some free. Yeah, don't worry about paying me, all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, the payment comes due, and then they got to start doing stuff so they don't get assaulted, so they don't get hurt. If they've developed an addiction, sex trafficking as well happens in this context. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can happen. And if you can get coming back to Family Reconnect, when feasible, safe, and possible, can you get that kid just back into that environment, that young person back into an environment where they can pick up, at least to a good extent, where they left off? So that is one approach, I think, that has a lot of promise when done well. Okay, other things that can be considered in terms of housing is we know where the majority of young people who become homeless flow from. Criminal justice interactions and systems, and child protection. This isn't a mystery. And we know young people who age out of child protection or finish with child protection, done serving a term or through the justice system. We know where they are. We know what their names are, and we know what's happening. What we need to do is provide supports. Again, this is this idea of rapid housing and rapid supports then, so they spend as little time as possible and at no time, ideally, experiencing any homelessness. For young people who've experienced homelessness for longer periods, it's a little bit different. Housing first is obviously a big discussion, is recognizing, is trying to get housing in place as rapidly as possible without a bunch of strings attached. Like, you need to be sober before you can come into this housing, or you need to do this, or you need to be that. Is getting housing in place, and then you do the wraparound interventions. Youth, it's a little bit different than perhaps some of the adult. Most of the literature there is about adults. So with young people, some young people really kind of do need a higher support environment, a congregate environment for some. That might be seen as really like, you're warehousing, or there are different pejorative terms used. But some young people get really isolated and don't have the independent living skills. Need a lot of help, and being kind of put into a single unit someplace far away from where they were subsisting on the streets, might not do well at all, versus being in a home where there's a shared kitchen, some shared living space, perhaps a peer support worker on site, and some daily visits from some workers, but with some other youth. And organizations can work some magic in figuring out what the right blend of young people is if they need abstinence, you put abstinence needing youth together, and harm reduction, you do that, and you establish some rules and boundaries so they can be safe. I mean, there's ways of doing it, setting up housing, and then wraparound supports really need to be customized. Like, frankly, some young people, they do just need that bachelor apartment someplace, and boom, they're gone. That's what they needed. They can get some work, they can figure it out and get going. They don't need psychotherapy. They don't need, a lot of workers. They don't need, social supports, but others do need a lot. And that's where some ongoing assessment to figure out, for some, do they need peer support? Do they need to engage some other young people who've been there but have moved on and are feeling stable in their lives? Because they need some stories and some perspectives that a person like me, a provider through a hospital or psychologist can't do. So there's a lot of brass tacks. So do you know how to deal with your bills? Do you know how to cook a meal? Do you know how to grocery shop on a budget? Do you know how to look for a job? Do you know how to have interactions with your landlord so you can keep your housing? Do you know how to deal with the justice system so you don't say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing and have the whole house of cards come down because you've got to go serve some time, even when everything had been set up? Getting a pardon, those sorts of things, getting identification. I mean, there's a lot, getting a phone number. It's hard to get a job if the business you're applying for is given some phone number at a shelter to call, and somebody takes a message for you because you're not there. There's all kinds of stuff that needs figuring out. And then lastly, psychological help, mental health and addictions help is key for many, and trying to assess, what do they need? Would they benefit from just a light touch wellness oriented group? For some, that's the ticket. For others, they need intensive one-to-one treatment for severe trauma, for psychoses that come up, for suicidality, addictions, the works. So it's really, it's as a kind of the message here is customizing and indexing to need. Having choice is so important. So many young people experiencing homelessness have had a profound lack of choice in so many areas that it's really refreshing, and it helps engagement a great deal to say, here are the menu of options. Let's talk about what you might need. And the young person might not always know on the front end what they need, but maybe they need to not do so well a bit in terms of a budget or something, and then see, okay, maybe you need a little more help there than you thought right out of the gate. So let's back things up a bit, and we can help you out with that. So, and then the last thing I'll say, in all interventions, just as important as what the thing is, whether it's CBT for social phobia or help with employment, the people that do the work, in psychotherapy, you call it the common factors. It means, do you have people helping you who can cultivate hope, who can speak to you in a way you understand, you can come together on shared goals, who care for you and you feel that care, and people that you can build a trusting relationship with? Those, these can be called soft skills. It can be made light of, right? It can be said, the real work is this, and then there's all this fluffy stuff. It's not fluffy stuff. If you've got, really, really skillful engagers who are working with young people, that can carry the day in so many ways and be so impactful. And sometimes it's hard to tell who that person is. It might be, it might be an employment counselor who's really the one that's carrying mental health for this young person, because they're the one that's able to engage in a way and really help them. It might be a peer support worker who really helps a lot of fundamental pieces and connects. So anyways, I'll stop there, but these are just some of the things I think they're important to think about. And ultimately, it comes back to a couple of other things. Funding, I've already talked about. Is we need a reasonable amount of funding, because nothing works well when it's scrabbling and cobbling, and we're in crisis response all the time. And then the last thing is evidence. We've got so many organizations doing so many different things, and really so little of it have we studied properly to understand what works best for who and when. And this is so important. We'll never have all the budgets that we want, but if we can better understand how to target and focus our dollars and stop doing some stuff that's not helpful and double down on things that are, I think that will make a big difference.